This week on episode 30 of Spooky Coop, Paul and Michelle delve into an age-old phenomenon that has fascinated and terrified human beings across cultures, shapeshifting. Specifically, we'll explore 3 incredible stories of humans transforming into animals. Hi everyone, I'm Paul.
And I'm Michelle.
And you're in
The Spooky Coop.
Welcome to the Spooky Coop. Hope you're not chicken. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Paul.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Doing fabulous, thank you. And here we are on a cool, cold, brisk, chilly, icy evening in New Hampshire, just before Christmas. And we are going to mix things up a little bit, shift things around. And this week, we're going to talk about...
Sounds like we're going to be dancing.
We're going to talk about shapeshifters.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes, we have 3 short stories about shapeshifting.
Oh, these are ones I haven't heard yet.
You may have, but I'm going to tell them to you anyway.
All right.
And in so doing, share them with our audience.
Aren't you fancy? And so doing.
Yes. And welcome, audience. We are very glad to have you here with us.
Yeah,
Thank you
guys.
for joining us. Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the coop.
Well-
Sorry.
Anyway, this evening I have 3 stories. One from a Hopi Elder, a friend of ours who has passed some years back, named Ed. Ed White Eagle was his name. The other is from a Lakota elder, a woman named Betty, who we call her. Her name was Betty, or Swift Coyote Woman.
Swift Coyote Woman.
Yeah.
Hated the beach. Well, she loved the beach, but it didn't like her.
It didn't like her, no. She was so happy to be there. She ran in the sand and
the first time she ever saw the ocean, ran to the wow, look, the ocean. Right there, face planted.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah, poor
Such
Betty.
a sweetheart, too.
Yeah, and all she said was, I kissed the sand.
Yes, and the third story is from a young man that, well, back then he was young. It was like close to 30 years ago.
He's probably...
An Ojibwa man. He was in his 20s when I met him. His name was Steve. And I'm not going to attempt to... He told me his... I will butcher...
Don't worry about it.
I will butcher the Anishinaabeg pronunciation of his name, so I'm just going to refer to him as Steve. So let's start with Ed's story, Ed White Eagle. He was a Hopi, and he was with his father, his uncle, and a friend of theirs, and they were performing a ceremony. It was obviously in the desert. It was out in Arizona, Utah area, and his job while they danced around this fire through the evening was to take care of the provisions, make sure water was available, and to, most importantly, to tend to the fire to make sure the fire kept going, is what he told me. And as his father, uncle, and their friend danced around the fire through the night, it went on for hours and hours and hours. And as a young man, he got more and more tired.
Bored, probably.
And he said it was late into the night. By his estimates, for the middle of the night, for him like 2, 3 in the morning. And as he watched them dance, he saw them begin to change shape. They began to look more and more canine. And then at some point, it became very clear.
The peyote kicked in.
He was... Shame
I'm just
on
kidding.
you. He was 10 years old. He was a kid. At some point, he realized they had turned into coyotes. Now, remember, Ed was like 70 years old when he was telling us this.
Yeah, that's right. He was.
This was something he remembered his whole life. You don't forget something like this.
Yeah.
And once they had fully transformed, if you will, shape-shifted into coyotes. They ran off into the desert.
On all fours.
On all fours.
Yeah, I remember him saying that.
Yeah. And he sat there waiting for them to return.
And keeping the fire going.
Keeping the fire going. He said he just got so tired. He didn't realize when, but at some point he fell asleep. Mm-hmm. Because he woke up in the morning, and it was daylight, and his father, uncle, and their friend were lying around the fire. They were laying in an irregular fashion, like against the rocks, one arm up, like they had sort of just stumbled there and collapsed.
Yep.
And they had blood around their mouth.
Around their mouths, yeah.
And like they had gone and
hunted, like they were animals.
Hunted animals and eaten something. Mm-hmm. Later on, his father explained to him that this type of ceremony was good for a person, for a human being to experience, because just like the animals, human beings have an animal part in themselves. And this was a way of expressing or releasing that animal part in a more healthy way, so that it didn't come out in other ways as a human being that could be harmful to your fellow community.
Right. I remember we asked Ed if he ever did it. And you remember he said, I don't want to talk about that. He said, no. But then later when we pushed him, he said, I don't want to talk about it.
Very personal to him.
Yeah, very, very personal.
We never pushed him. Besides, he was such a mountain of a man.
Oh my God! You remember the time that Ed just picked up? We said we need some wood, and he just picked up that tree, grabbed the branch of the tree, picked up.
There was a fallen birch tree, and he went over and he broke a 6-inch thick piece of trunk from the end of this fallen birch tree.
And he says, "This enough?"
it wasn't rotted either. It was
He
just twisted
solid wood, and he
back
just
and forth a couple of times, and bang,
right off.
He must have been close to 6'5", that man.
Yeah, and strong.
Oh, that's from years of working in construction, right?
Yeah. He worked in construction.
So my next story, then, I want to shift and tell Steve's story next.
You want to shape shift?
I want to shape shift to the next shape-shifting story. Steve's story. I met Steve.
You shape shift right now. I'm running out of here.
I might follow you on all fours.
That would be fun, actually.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Steve explained to me that he and his friends were out in Algonquin Park. Steve was from...
That's a place where a lot of strange things happen.
Yeah. Steve,
if you ever get up to Algonquin Park again, take me. I want to see that place.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful park. It is so big. It's like 60 miles across, filled with...
lions and tigers.
There's
and
campsites
bears
along the one road, but most of the park is primarily used for canoeing inland. Inland is the wrong word. Canoeing out from the highway, across the lakes and portage routes into some truly beautiful wilderness areas.
You've had some amazing experiences, and people you know have had some amazing experiences.
It has a particular magic to it, that area.
Well, apparently Steve had some too, so why don't you tell us?
So he and his friends, they had canoed in, and they were camping, and it was late at night. And as they sat around the fire, they heard something rustle. And they thought, well, maybe an animal. And then they heard some more rustling. They stood up and they shone a flashlight out, and they saw a figure running very quickly around the perimeter of the campsite, just off in the forest, right outside of the cleared area of the campsite. And then they saw another one run the opposite direction back, and then a third one. And they started to become quite nervous. They got huddled together, and they walked out to investigate. You know, Ojibwa people are, not all, but generally they come from a taller people, very tall, big people. You know, traditional Ojibwa people were towering 6'5", 6'7", very big people.
Wow, like the Pennacook were.
Like the Pennacook were, yeah. Anyway, they got close enough that these shadowy figures, they started to come forward.
I would have thought cryptid at first, I think.
Yeah, and they... Well, I'll explain why after that. He said that one of the figures came forward and slashed its arm across the head person in his party who was standing at the front across his chest, and it left marks. It left scratch marks right across his chest. And then the other guys behind came forward. Everybody started yelling. They thought they were dealing with some type of bear that had reared up, but there was a group of them. And at that point, these shadowy figures took off. They just ran. They disappeared. I should say that would be a better way to explain it. They disappeared off into the forest. And they were left with this one fellow with these scars that they couldn't explain slashed across his chest. So clearly it was something physical.
Right. Something with claws.
Something with claws.
Yeah.
But all three of these figures were running on their hind legs.
Yeah, so it couldn't have been a bear. Bears don't run like that.
No. So, given that we have these bipedal creatures running around in the forest, and I think the only place I ever heard or saw a bear running around on its hind legs was in some funny film of a bear in a suburb down in the south that had learned to walk on its hind legs to go collect food out of people's garbage cans, which was a hilarious video. The very smart bear.
Do you think that they could have seen like Bigfoots or something? Big feet?
Like Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I asked a friend of mine, Terry, down on the Watah, who was a member of the Bear Clan. That was his clan. What he thought it might be. And he looked at me kind of quizzically, almost like, are you an idiot? And
Terry was very intense. I met Terry.
Yes, best person in the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said to me, it really sounds like it was a group of people who were bearing. And I sort of shook my head. I mean, I was not very familiar at this point with what he was talking about. I said, what are you talking about? He said, it sounded like people had performed a ceremony and had shapeshifted into bears and were out running around in bear form. And I sort of took a deep breath but I couldn't.
They were looking for picnic baskets?
I couldn't. With the strange things that I had experienced, there was no way I could have judged this to be.
Yeah.
I had to keep an open mind. And, I didn't hear any other stories about such a similar thing in the area after that. I'm sure there were more. It takes some work to gain the trust of people. When I was driving with Steve, it was only after I had shared with him my personal experiences of the paranormal in the area that he then opened up to me. And he knew of my friendship with some of the Mohawk people to the south. Yeah,
what's interesting about all of this stuff is that you find the people who have the most intense emotional experiences are usually not the people out on top of the mountain screaming about it.
Yes, very, very true. Very true. You usually don't want to be out there saying things like that sound outlandish, lest you be treated outlandishly.
Yeah, and a lot of times what gets me, and I'm not saying anything wrong or bad about this, and I'm not being judgmental at all, because everyone's experiences are completely valid. But quite often, in my experience, people on television are having one experience.
And they're on a mission from God.
And they're on a mission from God to prove that one experience was real.
And it changes their life.
And it completely changes their whole life.
Yes.
Whereas so many people we know, and so many people, the people we know, have so many multiple experiences, and they're very quiet about it.
They learn to shut up quickly.
Yeah, because they're the ones who have the black helicopters following them. They're the ones who have the strange military. Can I cut in to tell everybody about the strange thing that happened to me this week when I was talking to another abductee?
Sure.
I was talking to this other abductee on the phone, and we were just talking. Nothing special, but we started talking about something that might have been a little provocative. As far as the UFO world goes. And all of a sudden, we heard something falling, like, and then we heard a man go, "Damn it!" Like he was mad that something fell, and then he picked it all up, and we could hear like shuffling around. And I said to her, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Did something fall over there?" She said, "No, I thought that was on your end." And I said, "Yeah, let's hang up. The guy needs some help."
So someone was listening in on the conversation.
Yeah, it goes back to that time when you were in Canada and I was in the United States when we first started talking so many years ago. And that was when phone calls were like $1 a minute or $1.50 a minute internationally. And I had run up a $600 phone bill and I couldn't pay it. It was just over $600. And my phone was going to be shut off. And I was talking to you and I said, my phone's getting shut off at the end of the week. And if you guys, and I just said this to no one, I said, if you guys still want to tap my phone line and find out what's going on between me and Paul, somebody better pay my bill or the phone line's getting shut off. And next thing you know, at the end of the week, my phone's still working. I called up the phone company and I said to them, I know you're going to be shutting off my phone. Is there any way that I can figure out a way to make payments or something? And the woman said, your phone bill's completely paid. It's been paid off. And I said to them, it must be a mistake. I didn't pay it. And they said, well, we don't know. Somebody paid off your phone bill. I said, who? And they said, we have no record of who paid it off. I said, well, how was it paid? She said, we have no record of how it was paid either. I said, was it cash? Was it check? Was it a credit card? They didn't have debits or anything back then. Yeah. We don't know. There's no record. Anyway, I've totally derailed us right now, and Paul has another story, and I really want to hear it.
And this is the third story that I have to tell you. So this story is from Betty, Swift Coyote woman, and she told it to us when she was in her 60s. This was many years ago. She was a young child at the time, just like Ed, and she was at a ceremony, a Lakota ceremony. She was watching. The impression she left was that there was there was a number of people at this ceremony, and she stood there watching. And this man, he had danced around this fire, similar methodology, she watched him turn into a bear in front of her eyes.
Wow.
And after some period of time, she didn't specify how much. I imagine seeing something like that, you don't know if it's 5 seconds or 5 minutes.
Especially as a kid.
It's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then he turned back into a human in front of her. And the really interesting thing about it that I find is that even though growing up in the culture she did, with the beliefs and the background, she said that to that day she still wondered if she saw what she believes she saw. Yet she cannot discount or deny that that is what her memory of the event was, that she saw a man.
I remember, but she only saw it once in her whole life.
In her whole life.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It begs one to wonder, are there people still doing this? And will the spirit of the animal, is there an agreement with the spirit of the animal, the bear spirit, the coyote spirit, the wolf spirit, that it will agree to change with the human?
Or with selected humans.
Or selected humans, yes.
Yeah. It gives you the wonder, like that famous place, Skinwalker Ranch. How did it get its name if it weren't an area where skinwalkers were very prevalent?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot other than what I've seen on TV.
Which has nothing to do with skinwalkers.
That's very little to do with skinwalkers. But we do have some information about what has gone on there, about the base that was there, that no longer is. And that is a great story for another podcast.
Right, and the idea that I suspect there was an edge there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And maybe a little bit of creative license.
course. Where would the world be without creative license?
Anyway, I loved your stories. That's really
I've
cool.
relayed these as accurately as I can from having heard them from these three different people, and I hope that it leaves people to want to think about it, to wonder about it. There's such a rich history of indigenous people shape-shifting. There's so much of it, so many stories about it. We should try to remember it. That period in history may have passed now.
It may not have. It may have just gone more underground because people ridicule it more. Once you stop honoring something.
Yes. It may be just sleeping for a bit until the right culture emerges once again.
Or it may be going on behind closed doors or behind closed doors of the non-indigenous.
Yes. So, with that, everybody.
And if anyone has any other stories about shape-shifting or of anything they've heard about or even done themselves,
please send it in to us. Send it to spookycoop@gmail.com. And that's the whole word. Send it to Spooky Coop, all one word. Send it to spookycoop@gmail.com. And, dear audience, have a wonderful week. Be safe. Be happy. We wish you a week of hope and wonder. May you shape your world to what you want it to be. Until next time, when we see you in the Spooky Coop.